Museum, and it's my privilege to welcome you here for this special evening with Brian Donnelly, who's known around the globe and perhaps by now intergalactically as KAWS. KAWS's practice has been grounded in a deep and sustained involvement with the printed image and popular modes of printmaking from the beginning. From your early billboard interventions to the ad interventions in New York with the bus stop shelters and phone booths, to the sumptuous, painstakingly crafted prints that you've been making the last decade. The exhibition KAWS PRINTS, I hope you've seen it, is a 20-year survey of printmaking by the artist, and it features more than 140 works, including all of the artist edition prints in the High Museum's collection, as well as single edition prints, drawings, and color charts that are on loan from the artist studio. The exhibition's on view at the High Museum until the 27th of this month, so you have 17 days to see the exhibition, come back and enjoy it, and come back again. Before we get started, I just have a few individuals and organizations I'd like to acknowledge, our sponsors, beginning with the Jane and Clay Jackson Conversations with Contemporary Artists Endowment. Thank you, Jane and Clay. Our lead sponsor for the exhibition is Invesco QQQ. The High's premier sponsor is Delta Airlines. So when you get that survey tomorrow, Brian, please give them high marks. Our premier sponsors are Sarah and Jim Kennedy, Louise Sams and Jerome Griot, and the estate of Dr. Joan H. Weens, as well as Wish Foundation. Our benefactor supporters are the Ann Cox Chambers Foundation, Robin and Hilton Howell, and our ambassador supporters are the Antinori Foundation, Corporate Environments, and Chris and Elizabeth Willett. And finally, a heartfelt thanks to you all, those of you who are members of the High Museum. We can't do what we do without you. And in fact, we do what we do for you. So thank you. If you're not a member or if you need to renew, visit high.org at some point soon and join us. So I guess finally, we couldn't have an exhibition literally without the work of the artist and his extraordinary generosity. So Brian, thank you. So you all know KAWS, that's why you're here. But I'm going to give you a few biographical details before we start our conversation. KAWS was born in 1974 in Jersey City, New Jersey. He's the proud papa of two of the sweetest little girls you'll ever meet in your life. For decades, KAWS has engaged audience. They are, they're the sweetest.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Oh my gosh.
Should I test it? Does this work?
Yeah.
Is that working? Who's in charge of the AC? It's pretty cold.
For decades now, KAWS has engaged audiences far beyond the confines of museums and galleries where he regularly presents his works around the world. He gained a reputation early in his life as a teenager, as a graffiti writer in New York, primarily, I think.
Jersey City.
In Jersey City.
Yeah.
Before graduating in 1996 from SVA, School of Visual Arts in New York. Since then, he's produced a body of extraordinarily influential work that brings together painting and sculpture and printmaking with public art and technology and industrial and product design. So with that, Brian, thank you again for being here. I'm going to move to the next slide. We have had a problem with our clicker, so if we have a problem, forgive me, and I will correct it. This is a slide from our 2012 exhibition, which is called Downtime. And this exhibition, KAWS PRINTS, issued from that exhibition in 2012. And the current exhibition is remarkable for a number of reasons. One of them is that it is one of 8 exhibitions produced around the world by KAWS. It only is surpassed, as far as I know, in 2019 when you did 10 exhibitions all over the place, including Japan and China and Brazil and Taiwan and Korea and even, I think, even Texas. So you've been busier than most artists during the pandemic.
I haven't counted.
I've counted, and it's like amazing. Last year was incredible. So, during the pandemic, during this lockdown, this is so great to see you all here tonight because it's the first time I've been in this space for 3 years. Have there been any silver linings for you? Opportunities that have been presented to you?
I don't know. I'm pretty optimistic. I think I kind of look at everything as like a silver lining. You're talking about the pandemic?
Yeah. Because you've been so productive.
I'm a homebody. I spend so much time alone in my studio and with my assistants, and I feel like, we were locked down for a while. I got pretty sick, and after that point, I was just back in the studio alone. So it's not that,
Did you have your assistants in the studio?
Yeah, I mean, they kind of, off the record, they came in pretty early just because they wanted to, and we kind of had we're like family. It's a really small studio. Yeah. So it was, there's a trust level there. We're all responsible and kind of.
I think
that's what I asked in the beginning. Is it working?
Can we maybe
is it not working?
Crank up Brian's microphone? Can we sing something, Brian, for us and check it?
Did I not turn it on? No.
Oh, no, it's on.
I turned it on. She's coming all
Sorry
the way
about
around.
that.
It's going to be like Shrek. There's going to be all these things for you. All right, sorry.
The lovely and talented Erin Doherty, ladies and gentlemen.
What part of it are you worried about? Is that not working? That's working. I feel like I... All right, I'll leave it. Who said that about the mic? No, I'm kidding.
What? Uh-oh. Well,
sorry.
Anyway,
this is my first night doing stand-up. Bear with me. Is that not? That's fine. All right, we're good? Think so?
Good?
Is there a second person? That might be impossible. All right, so why are we here, Michael? No, see,
there you go. That's better.
Annoying.
That's good. We were just talking about how busy you've been during the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I stayed busy. I always kind of find ways to stay busy. So, but it's great. It's great to be like, this is, it's kind of surreal being in a room full of people like this. I did a show recently in January in London, and I think that was like the real sort of first exhibition I did that was out, Before that, I did a show in Tokyo at the Mori Museum last year, and it was right before the Olympics, and I got a government, exception to come into the country. They let me install my show, but I couldn't attend my opening. And so I stayed there all week installing, and then I couldn't, because I wasn't from the country. So.
Wow.
Yeah, but it was fun. I mean, I was happy to be there and kind of being like, making sure everything was fine.
Yeah. Well, you just mentioned the London show, which was at the Serpentine Gallery, which is amazing. I mean, it's one of the great.
Yeah, it just ended. It was at the Serpentine. It was also existing in Fortnite, which is a video game. I don't know how familiar some of you might be. But that was a great opportunity. I mean, actually, yeah, there is a lot of, we launched this Acute Art, which is an augmented reality app. It's free. It's on your app store if you're curious, where you can place digital works anywhere. And we launched that literally March 12th, 2020.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that you seem to be sort of uncannily prescient, launching this app in 2020 just before the pandemic lockdown, and then all the museums, including this museum included, and we did a good job at it, I think, trying to figure out how to do our programming remotely. And
I mean, the original intention of that app was we had a global exhibition set up where we were inviting people to come to locations to see the works. But then when things changed, we just made it, so that you can have it in your own house and free.
Yeah. So all these projects that you've been doing since 2020, they've been planned long in advance anyway, or are there things
some of them, like the Brooklyn Museum, we were working on for a long time, and then, things shift and you shift with it. It's just sort of what you do.
Right. Well, this slide on the screen is, again, this is an image of a figure called Companion passing through, and it's a, for us, it was a huge sculpture. It had to be airlifted down over the museum,
Yeah,
which was
I remember you
horrifying.
crammed it over the back.
Yeah, but it anticipated, and the sculpture really traveled internationally before it arrived here, but it anticipated all this monumental sculpture and public art you've been doing since.
Yeah, this was the first public work that I did. Not its location at the High. It started in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And then went to the Aldrich and did different locations. But this work kind of really planted the seed for a lot of future opportunities.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, thank you for having me here.
Absolutely.
So.
We actually installed it before the 2012 exhibition. Remember, at the end of 2011, we installed this sculpture first. And the exhibition opened. It was a revelation for all of us at the museum because what it did, it introduced this museum to an entirely new demographic cross-section of young and diverse audiences, which has been something that we were deeply concerned with for the past 6 years or so.
Deeply concerned.
No, we are. No, that's our mission. That's who we are today, right? But when we did the show with you, it was remarkable to see the people who came for the opening, to the exhibition throughout its run, because these were young people, cross cultural barriers and origins, and you know, I don't want to say kids. I'm very avuncular looking, I know, but young people, and we didn't see them very often at that time, but now we do. So thank you for launching us.
I'm happy to do that for you.
So I wanted to just, Companion is a figure that shows up in your work in 1999, right?
Yeah, it started you got to get this mic right at some point.
Is that okay?
It keeps going like echo, not echo. Anyway, I don't know. No, it started as a small toy, you know. And it was really, you know, I had friends who were making these toys in Japan, and it kind of gave me an outlet to make a work in 3D, to do a sculptural work. And I think it definitely opened up a lot of opportunities. And, you know, when I first made it, I thought it would be a one thing and move on.
Yeah.
But now it's like a sibling that just kind of trails me.
He's your companion, right? I mean...
Yes.
I mean, to me, he represents a kind of hybrid post-pop figurative sculpture or figure whose subjectivity is keenly felt. I mean,
it's a way that I kind of get my observations and my thoughts out through it. Just the way, you know, painters have their muse and decide to use whatever human form to express what they're thinking. I use these figures.
Yeah. So. And it's for me, it's really interesting because when you think of like classic American pop or other contemporary art that crosses borders in terms of merchandise and design and contemporary art, there's often that kind of subjectivity, that kind of sense of, and this figure especially, expression of vulnerability or loneliness or, you know, what have you, is absent. And this figure is very present.
Yeah, I mean, when I was younger, I was very much aware of like the pop artists and looking at the additions that they made, like the, you know, places like Gemini, doing, you know, Oldenburg's profiteroles and things like this. Yeah. But, you know, I grew up I was born in the 70s, kind of sort of started getting my work out there in the 90s. It was pretty emo at the moment. Hey, come on, we're talking, yeah.
Well, move to our next slide. This is an image of an early billboard intervention that you did when you were writing graffiti.
Yeah, this is 95-ish, 96.
And it's on a Marlboro billboard?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much worked with whatever I had. So, you know, one of the great things about growing up in Jersey City is I had access to, like, billboards and freight trains. And it's sort of like, you know, I loved painting always since I was younger, and this was sort of a way of doing it, almost as sport, you know.
And, you know, it was not legal, right?
Yeah. Michael.
Well,
Yeah.
so it took a lot of sort of ingenuity and nerve and a lot of chutzpah.
You just weigh out the risks. I mean, I feel like the country goes through different moments of like, what's the consequences for doing certain things.
Yeah.
And in the 90s, I felt like painting versus consequences, like I chose painting. And it seemed fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's worked out.
Yeah.
It's worked out. So are billboards, would you say that billboards are your first kind of serious engagement with the printed commercial image? I mean, there are always like often logos on the sides of train cars and stuff like that, but in terms of a printed commercial image,
I think when, so 1993 was the first billboard that I painted over, and at that time in New York, there was what they call production walls where, guys would get together and sort of paint these different, and they were legal, like in Washington Heights and the Bronx, and you'd go and a bunch of guys would paint a wall together, and you'd spend a whole day on it, or 2 days or something.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I was doing these billboards, and I was like comparing pictures, and I just felt so much more inclined towards the interaction with advertising and sort of like creating a work on top of a work that's just omnipresent at that moment. And it just got me thinking about the parallels with advertising and graffiti and sort of the jockeying for space and attention. And so, yeah, it kind of led me into later the phone booths and bus shelters. And that's kind of where, like, oh, look. At that point, I started to let some of the lettering go and getting more into iconography and sort of opening up the imagery to a wider audience, I would say,
Yeah. Well, nice segue to our next slide.
And, also at the time, so in '96, I moved from Jersey City, which was my parents, into Manhattan. And so I kind of lost a lot of the opportunity for billboards, and it switched over to like kiosks and breaking into phone booths and bus shelters and things.
Did you say breaking into?
Yeah, it was all just locks. So I wouldn't paint them on the spot. I would just work in my house and change them out.
Yeah. So you were doing that while you were at SVA or before?
Yeah. Well, no, while I was at SVA.
Yeah. And you, as far as I understand it, you acquired the key to that, these booths from Barry McGee?
Yeah, for the phone booths.
Yeah.
And then the bus shelters were all master lock systems, and so I started taking the locks and making keys. And so,
Are they all the same? Are they all the same key?
So, all right. Do you want the tutorial? No. So basically, if you were to take a lock off of 6th Avenue bus shelter, bring it to a locksmith, make a key for it, that lock gets destroyed, but the companies would keep all 6th Avenue the same key.
Ah.
So then now you have a key for all of them. So you do it for Houston, you do it for 6th, you do it for whatever your sort of what you thought was the right place to be.
That's awesome. You're my hero.
It was fun. I mean, it was the 90s. There's frenzy of like street art and not many people messing with the things, so it was sort of a playground.
And now everyone does it. I mean, anyway, that's my own thing. It's a kind of artistic strategy.
Does it. I just think companies, after so many times, they get like, okay, how do we deal with this?
Yeah.
People find ways to keep you from doing it, and I think the landscape changes.
Yeah.
I don't know. When I first did it, they would last for a month or 2 months out on the street, and then towards the end, it would be like maybe by midday it'd be gone.
How would the person who stole it, the second person who stole it, because you stole it first, how would they get it? They had the key.
No, they would shatter.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So that's not fun.
Oh well. Oh well. We'll move on then.
Yeah.
So this project, this experiment that you were embarking upon with these shelters and phone booths, seems to me to represent what Marshall McLuhan described in The Medium is the Massage, in terms of the figure ground in Gestalt psychology. That is, the figure being the medium, the advertisement, and the ground being the context in which it's placed. So neither is complete or intelligible, without the other. Is that something that was on your mind while you were at SVA? Did you study media theory?
No, it was more like, you gotta understand, like as a young artist, you don't have many opportunities, and I felt like this was a way to create a dialogue with the public. You know, there's no red tape, there's no curator. There's, you know, it just is completely dependent on how much I want to get out and do stuff. And, you know, so that's what I loved about it. That's what I loved about graffiti before it. And it really just kind of gave me a way to put work into the public without a filter.
Yeah, but that sort of conversation between a transgressive fine art practice and the commercial image maybe also came out of your professional, your work before school and during school, as well as your other foot in the world of fine art and fine art practice, maybe? Or
I think it just came stemming straight from graffiti into like, listen, these advertisers put enough of their money into researching the best locations, and I want to take them. So,
I never thought of that. That's
it's really,
yeah.
Things are pretty simple at that point. Yeah. So, but I mean, this actually, the piece on your right, I think I'm gonna segue for you.
Please.
Was one of the first prints I did, because I was thinking of, you know, before that I was hand painting all the bus shelters and phone booths, and I really wanted to make a printed one so that I can do more and kind of put more into the world. And that's kind of what got me curious about printing.
And did it also save you time because you didn't have to come back?
It actually didn't, because at that time I didn't have the money to produce prints at that scale on Mylar. So I was like, I could either sit here and paint this thing, or I can take all my earnings and pay for this print. So I just put paintings.
You ate Wonder Bread.
It's the only print. That's the only print I did at that size.
Yeah, and that's your first silkscreen print is this Christy Turlington image.
Yes.
Yeah. Which we have in the exhibition. And we have both the Mylar version and a version on a deckled-edged paper, handmade paper.
I mean, the Mylar ones were made to go on the street, and then the paper ones paper was more receptive to the ink, and we just made a finer print.
Yeah. We have a lot of early prints from that moment in your life in the exhibition, which you generously lent to us, because I'm not sure, were you thinking about at that time about editioning work and hanging on to editions for yourself, or was it really something so experimental that you were kind of giving them away to friends or selling them?
A little bit of both. I remember I took them to the new museum, and there was a woman there, Jennifer Heslin, at the bookshop.
Yeah.
That started selling my editions. She just let me consign them and sell them. And I think it was just it was easier for me to kind of give prints away, and it sort of makes it a little bit more tangible for people, I think. And for me as an artist, like, not to always part with paintings.
Yeah.
But I also, I was really curious in the medium, and sort of like the way I paint paintings is almost like the way a printmaker would go about making prints, and thinking about the translucency and what needs to go down first, second, third. So
that was a great store, and the old
the Broadway New Museum.
New museum.
So good.
Absolutely. We're going to advance, fast forward to 2013. 14? 13. With this portfolio. Ups and Downs, which was your first portfolio, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Right? And that was a year after our exhibition at the museum. So was there something that compelled your interest in making portfolios, which is, rather formal or historical, has a historical connection, in terms of modern art. It's kind of framed between Ambrose Vollard in the 19th century and Warhol, in terms of portfolio as a strategy for getting work out in the world, and also, finding new ways to experiment with media, with images.
Yeah, I was looking at it, like, this is how I paint in the studio. When I create bodies of work, if I have exhibitions, there's usually like 10 to 15 things on the wall, and I work on them going around. I don't like started painting, finish painting, and move on. So a lot of times with these series, I'll be working on paintings like that, and then I just wanted to do a print thing, a print portfolio that was sort of reflective of that process. And, I like to, and it just sort of lets me like hone in on a body of work and then move past it. And, I like the format and size, so I did a few of them afterwards, like Blame Game and Man's Best Friend. Yeah, I see them.
Which we'll see in a minute. So when you're doing that, when you're working between painting and printmaking, you anticipated my next question about the relationship between painting and printmaking, because a lot of painters study printmaking, and there is, for many painters, an important relationship, because with prints, as you know, you can deconstruct them, you can take apart an image and then put it back together, and so it allows you to experiment with form and with composition and color. Did that happen in your other work as you were working on prints, or vice versa?
I've always been interested in printmaking, like just from doing graphics for streetwear, for skateboards, for from my first stickers on, it's just a thing that I like. I like the idea of creating multiples, and sometimes at like a modest scale, sometimes in the thousands, and that's why I do things like Reese's Puffs, and like to me doing a cereal and like growing up on those boxes and the graphicness of it and all the different print applications they do to them makes me want to kind of work within that realm. And
yeah, and I remember the Reese's box, the sort of special edition box had a special like texture on the back. What do you call that in printmaking?
Yeah, just like embossing, debossing, spot varnish. Like I live for all that stuff, and you see it in my paintings too.
Yeah.
So.
Unfortunately, this is my fault. I wanted to put Maryland portfolio here by Warhol, but we have Mao, because you've been in China recently, so it makes sense. But for art history, the art history that's kind of relevant to our conversation in your work, the Maryland portfolio marked a new elevated position for graphic arts in the 60s as a fine art medium. And it's something that I think happened beforehand, maybe we'll mention later with Jean Dubuffet, but there seems to be a direct relationship between Warhol's silkscreen portfolios and your portfolios, simply in terms of the number of images in your portfolios typically are 10, like Warhol's, and the edition size is close to, or I'm not sure if it's the same as Warhol's prints, but similar. Is or was the legacy of Warhol in American pop?
Yeah, Warhol was a huge
mind?
Influence, definitely. Yeah. I think he's changed the landscape, and yeah.
But also just in terms of kind of reaching new audiences, non-art audiences, people who are not buying gilt-framed paintings on the walls, but rather reaching entirely new kinds of audiences.
I'm constantly thinking about what reached me as a kid. What got me into art, what got me knowing about people making art, and how did I navigate those sort of paths. And so I try to make work that disseminates in these different channels, and that's why I like to do all these different projects, whether it's a clothing project or a sneaker project or a print project. I see them all in the same way, as sort of creating these objects that exist and can kind of communicate in different, just in people's lives in different ways.
And I think there's also still almost a transgressive quality, at least to your paintings and prints and all of your work in a way, because you introduce something back into the sort of fine art discourse that's still, I think, hard for the art world establishment to digest. We're looking at Roy Lichtenstein's Look Mickey, one of the great Lichtenstein paintings, early hand-painted pop paintings from 61, sorry, of course, 61. But your reference to, lowbrow, cartoons still transgresses this art world orthodoxy, like Look Mickey here. And at the time, this was an outrageous affront to sort of the austerity of the avant-garde in terms of the early minimalists, or on the other side of the spectrum, the angst-filled abstract expressionists. So for you, was thinking about and introducing comic or cartoon characters into your work likewise a deliberate kind of poke in the eye to the art world, the really serious art world?
No, I think it's more of just an honest approach to what I want to see made. I'm always looking at everything sort of on an equal viewing level, and to me it's baffling how some things get raised up and some things get ignored, and sort of the importance of artists, that influence other artists. And I just try to be honest with myself and make the work I want to make. And I don't think you can aim to try to please somebody, because that's sort of
or provoke somebody.
Yeah, it's not. If somebody gets their feathers ruffled by my work, that's fine. It's nothing you can anticipate or try to work around. You sort of create the work, and then the world will respond in the way that they do, or not respond.
Right.
So.
Absolutely. We talked about companion earlier because it's an important companion for you, follows you around the world, to Atlanta, I'm sure. He's here, upstairs on the second floor of ACC. And that figure, companion, is the body of Mickey Mouse, classic Walt Disney cartoon with this puffy skull and crossbones head. And over the course of your career, you've alluded to a lot of other cartoon characters. A couple of those are on the screen here. So I guess you probably just answered this question that I had. And if you did, that's cool. But, is there something about cartoon characters that makes us, or do you have an idea what it is about cartoon characters that makes us want to empathize with them?
I just think, I've always been drawn to them because they're universal. I like the fact that, kids growing up in different countries could be growing up on the same cartoons and, redone in their languages. And it's sort of this universal thing that doesn't age. And, I think it's, aesthetically I'm drawn to it. I kind of see it, it's just like as actors that don't get old. And I like, the idea of working on something like that than drawing a person.
And actors we can project onto also, I think maybe I'm speaking for myself personally, I guess. That,
yeah.
That happens to me when I look at it.
Yeah, you don't have expectations the way you do a human.
Exactly.
So.
You're not let down by humans. This is another Billboard project, and I bring it up because there is one character you've had a long time engagement with, special to me from my childhood, because it meant it's time for Christmas, or it's time for Easter, or Halloween. It was always holiday time was the time to see Peanuts cartoons, and that was awesome because no school and all that. But in '95, you painted.
Yeah, in '95 it was time for a great highway spot. So this is coincidental. We were just looking for whatever was on the highway that was high visibility, and seeing this billboard was just a good opportunity. But then later on, I did several works. Like I did collaborations with Peanuts, and I did the toy when I had the shop called Original Fake. And then later, I started using the line art. I used to just, kind of redrawing it in a way. I just liked the looseness of it. I felt like a lot of my paintings had this sort of rigidness to them, and I liked the sort of fluidity of the line. And it almost didn't matter after a certain point what it sort of came from. It just sort of got me to where I needed to be.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it sort of reoccurred in different stages.
And it comes back in this portfolio. You mentioned earlier MBF, which is man's best friend, which refers to a dog. I mean, that expression.
To a dog, yes.
Yeah. I mean, it was popularized by the poet Ogden Nash in '49 in his book, An Introduction to Dogs, and was also the name of a Peanuts cartoon, I think in '83. We talk about in the exhibition, in my interpretive text, we talk about Snoopy as sort of an equivalent for, not you, but for artists. Because he's rebellious. He's a rebellious spirit, and he doesn't like to be leashed. Daydreams about fighting the Red Baron, and all that. Does Snoopy have that kind of connotation for you?
When I'm making works, I'm not really thinking about the narrative. It's more about, I kind of get lost in the compositions and using it to sort of create these objects. So when I'm doing this or something else, I don't have it like an episode in mind. I don't have a show in mind. So.
And for the line work in this body of work, and then the works, the paintings on paper, which were in your Brooklyn show, which are beautiful, and the wallpaper that these are mounted on, it almost evokes the kind of formal qualities of, say, Franz Klein. Because it's simple, because it's black and white and it's quasi-abstract.
Right. Well, in 2000, I did a series of package paintings, which were these paintings that I did that I presented in sort of like a blister pack, the way a Star Wars figure would be in. So I worked with a toy factory to produce like the largest blister packs they could do to present these paintings. And I did all these black and white paintings where I just zoomed in on one image at different moments. And I want to kind of come back to that with the series. So I started Man's Best Friend as a series, and it started like super abstract paintings and then getting more busy and just kind of moving along from there.
I remember seeing some of the early ones in your studio. You pulled a screen out, and I didn't know what the reference was for
and
a little bit.
It's not important for me that you do.
Yeah.
So. No, for anyone.
Well, I read a lot of art historical references into your work because I know that you have this amazing visual acuity, and also you're an amazing collector. And this is another group of works based on the Snoopy character. But your work over the course of your career has brought into conflict and accord popular cultural sources with high art references, or references to the so-called high art world. And from Franz Klein, I mentioned, to Jean Dubuffet, we see here on the screen, to Lichtenstein, Keith Haring, so many others. And for us, it's special because one of the references you make in our show and the painting that we own that's on view right now in our galleries is to H.C. Westerman, who is a special artist to me. And do those kinds of references, are they deliberate, or is it more part of that process of sort of thinking about just painting and kind of culling from that kind of visual acuity that you continue to build?
Yeah, I kind of see images as, when you create a painting, now it's in the world, and then other people can take from it and build off of it. So it's sort of just a small part of a story. And, I look at artists' work the way I look at, like, graphics and different things, and there's things that sort of stick out and give me starting points for creating new works. And I remember when we did the show in 2012, that's all I wanted to talk to you about was H.C. Westerman, because I knew you did the catalog raisonné. So I was like, never mind our stuff. Where are these pieces?
And I wanted to talk about your work.
Yeah.
There's like, you got chocolate in my peanut butter. You got peanut butter in my chocolate. That was ad lib. I know. Sorry about that. With Westerman or other references that may come into work, like Rauschenberg's A Race to Kooning, which was both a critique and homage. Is that? Could you say the same about your work? Is it both, or is it something else? I mean, besides what you just described.
Yeah, I think especially with the Western pieces, I haven't done many pieces like that, but I don't know, like I would see they came from really small watercolors, and I started to imagine them as 10-foot paintings. And, after a certain point when I'm getting into the painting, you sort of lose the original reference.
Yeah.
But it's what got me there. So I kind of look at a lot of things like that.
Sorry, I'm still thinking about Reese's. Have you done a collaboration with Reese's?
I have. Yeah.
Well, the
Reese's Puffs.
The Puffs.
Yeah.
But the candy bar?
No.
Okay.
It's not a bar.
We're looking at contour prints in the exhibition that are based on contours of the Snoopy character. In 2013, around the same time, a little earlier than this, you were making shaped canvases.
Yeah, when I got into doing shapes, then that kind of let me use the shape as the reference point and kind of become a lot freer with what went inside it.
So what went inside it was just, again, kind of automatic, or?
It's just an accumulation of images that
I
felt like sort of had a relationship to each other.
For me, these have this direct relationship to the Orlu personnage of Dubuffet, because there's this figure within which is this abstract composition of form that has nothing to do with the actual referent or the subject, or the figure rather, with Dubuffet. And Dubuffet for me also is interesting in terms of you and your career for a couple of reasons. He championed screen printing before the pop artists did. He did that in the 50s, maybe even the 40s, back when artists used fine art printmaking processes, intaglio processes. He also championed self-taught art, like you do. And in 1951, he gave a famous address at the Arts Club in Chicago called Anti-Cultural Positions. So he carved a space out for himself outside the art world, and that seems to me what you've done for yourself, even though you're perhaps one of the best-known artists in the world. I mean, it just is the case, I think. But still, I think you still operate outside of the sort of mainstream art world. Would you say that's accurate? Or?
I'm here at the High Museum. I don't know, I focus on what I want to make. Some of it exists within the sort of art context and the gallery, museum, that kind of world, and other it exists in the supermarket or, in a sneaker store. And to me, it's not important to kind of like pin down exactly what category I should be in.
Right.
I remember I was doing graffiti for, a long time, and I started to paint over phone booths and bus shelters, and then I kind of like, they're like, what are you doing? This isn't graffiti, this is this other thing. And then, then I start making toys, and there's always sort of like, you have people that enter your work at whatever point they do, and that's kind of what they think of you as, and I try to pretty much ignore that. So.
No, I remember when we did this 10 years ago, everyone wanted to call you a street artist. I mean,
every journalist still writes graffiti artist in the first paragraph, period. And we started this talk off with graffiti.
We did.
So.
I'm sorry.
No, for me it's fine. It's just that like I hold that world in such high regard.
Yeah.
As I do, most of whether it's fashion or whatever else I'm working in, and I don't know. I don't think it's important to kind of like.
No.
Pin things down or generalize about everything. There would be somebody looking at it like a wooden sculpture of mine and saying like, oh, look at this street art sculpture or something. I'm like, what the hell are you looking at? So.
But we were talking earlier about the kind of barrier between artists who have their roots in graffiti and then the sort of sanctioned art world on the other side. And I guess my earlier question was going into the direction is, is part of this have to do with your background and being able to then kind of both work very well and successfully in both, or not in both, but in the sanctioned art world, but staying kind of an arm's length from its machinations?
I don't know. It's as an art, you can only make the work you want to make.
Right.
And I happen to like making stuff in all these different categories. And there was a point early, I remember, people made it very clear to me that you can either be a fine artist or a commercial artist, but you had to like sort of choose a lane. And I just sort of like, when I started Original Fake, at that point, opening that store, I was like, forget galleries. Like, I'm never, like, done.
Yeah.
Like, that's not something, I can't see myself in that world. This is great. This gives me an open outlet to people at this moment. And then, yeah, right after that point, I started to get a lot of shows. So.
Is that why you're drawn to, in part, to self-taught art? Because they're on the outside
for me, self-taught art, like, there's something really refreshing about it. Just thinking of artists working, in their space, not concerned about the sort of outer world around them.
Yeah.
So.
That's a good segue to this little bit I wanted to talk about, and that is in reference to a book by Tom Wolfe, who wrote A Man in Full. Anyone who lives in Atlanta is supposed to read it. I had to read it. Tom Wolfe criticized Clement Greenberg in this book, and Harold Rosenberg and Leo Steinberg, arguing that these critics dominated the art world with their theories, and that, unlike the world of literature, where anyone can buy a book, the art world was controlled by an insular circle of rich collectors, museum curators, and critics with outsized influence, thereby sort of erecting barriers to the art experience and also art ownership. And although the secondary market for contemporary art in general is off the charts, your toys and edition items, objects, merchandise, prints, are accessible to a much greater majority than most artists out there. And so is there a democratic principle that's still important to you in terms of this, and that could be extended to your work now with AR technology?
Yeah, I just see it as communication. I see it as like sort of creating relationships and having the work out there. I'm not interested in just existing in this sort of wholly rarefied space. I don't ever want to do something that would cheapen my work in any way. If I make an object, it has to be, like I'll make a toy with the sort of same sort of rigor as a large bronze piece. And with AR, I was at first skeptical about, I didn't want to make something gimmicky. I was a little bit sort of uncertain about digital works, and in working with Acute and sort of seeing their capabilities. I mean, the conversations I have with them about the stuff we produce is really just like the foundries that I'm making bronze pieces with. It's all just about form and texture and the color and getting sort of the right feeling. And so I think to me it's an honest outlet.
Yeah. You used, or rather, technology played a role in the Brooklyn show, which was beautiful to a degree. But the Serpentine show, was that the first major museum exhibition, where your experimentation with technology really was foregrounded?
I mean, that's the first, it was sort of the other shows we were building up towards it, really. Like, by the time Serpentine came around, the combination of having it in Fortnite and then existing in AR, anybody could look at the whole entire Serpentine through their phone in their house and,
right.
See the exact floor plan that exists in real life in the space. As things go on, like you do, like it's just like anything. You make something and you see it and you think about how you'll do it differently next time. And I feel like, this is just where we were in this January.
Do you think that, I don't know what my question is exactly. I keep coming back to college football back before it was televised, and the story goes that, college football didn't want to televise the games because they thought no one would come to the game. But when they did, they realized they increased their audience 2, 3, 4, 10-fold. So with AR technology, do you see this as a way of expanding or creating new audiences? not redirecting audiences away from sculpture or from prints, but
No, it's a completely different thing. I mean, one of the things I do love about it is that anyone can have access and kind of have the same experience in whatever country you are as I am having it through my device, whatever device you're using. And it's not an ownership thing. It's more of like just an experience, and you're getting to look at a work and walk around a work in your space.
yeah.
So it is kind of relief that it's not like this thing that somebody buys and sells and
yeah.
resells or whatever it is.
Right, right. We're looking, I advanced the slide, we're looking at one of the images from a recent portfolio titled Urge, along with its drawing, both on view and in the exhibition. Drawing in your practice has always been a way of transforming one image into another medium, or transferring one image to another medium. So that drawings become prints, and is it?
I'm joking.
They become toys, prints become T-shirts. In fact, T-shirt design you've singled out as a sort of unique form of drawing in a way. So do you always start a work by drawing?
I mean, a lot of times, like with the paintings and the prints, I'll make drawings, I bring it into the computer. I've always kind of gone back and forth between working in the computer and working in super analog. And this is the first time, or the second time that I really brought it into a print process that's final. Normally, this would be more stuff that I bring into graphics for clothing and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And the drawing on the right on the screen is a drawing that I think is, I hate to say the word typical when I'm talking to an artist, but I'll just say it's what I expect to see in a drawing of yours, because there are types of mark making that I think about with your work, which is hatching and cross hatching and contour drawing, which departs from the kind of strict line work in your paintings and even in the prints. But in this portfolio, this was not the first time that the hand of the artist is retained, but it's the first portfolio where we actually see kind of the hand of the artist. Was there anything that prompted this kind of departure from your earlier printmaking
It's just stress
style?
relief.
Yeah. Well, this was also, speaking of stress relief, this was made during lockdown, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what, like, all pen drawings, what I did for, better part of the first year in 2020. And then it's only after that, when I got into the studio, that I started to do, like, the large Urge paintings and, yeah.
So is that why in the print portfolio, there's a border? So it's a small image, I mean, relatively small compared to your other prints.
Yeah, because that's, like, I just had pens and my computer, and that was it. So, no, I remember, like, this series was all about, like, all the news was going on about, like, don't touch your face, don't touch this, don't touch that. And, I'm like in my bed, like, fucking COVID, I can't breathe. And you're seeing all this stuff on the news, and it's like you get completely obsessive about everything. And you're like Perelling every 2 seconds. And
right.
so that's what those. Yeah, sorry if anyone you own these prints now. You're gonna go home and be like, oh God.
We own them, which I have to say I neglected to mention because I wanted to just bring up the fact that the High Museum, own most of your edition works. Because in 2012, when we did the show, you generously made a print for the High Museum to benefit the museum and gifted us a print from that edition. And after you and I spoke, we thought, well, maybe it's a good idea if we get an edition so that we have, more or less a full run of your edition work. So thank you for that. This is an aspect of your character that I think is remarkable, and that is generosity. During the pandemic, for example, Brian, just in terms of our context here, Brian and his wife, who's another wonderful artist, made significant contributions to the New Georgia Project during the runoff elections, for example. That was only one of many things that you've done for different organizations and charities. And it's, I just wanted to say thank you for that, and it's remarkable. I don't see it, I see it rarely.
Cool,
So,
thank you.
Thank you. So we include in the exhibition, if you've seen it, in this large gallery, the drawings with the related prints. And then we have in the exhibition 2 big vinyl, this like wallpaper installations that Brian designed for us for the show. One of them is based on a color chart for one of the prints in the exhibition. And we borrowed a series of color charts for, I think it's the last portfolio, unless you've made a new one.
No.
Okay.
No.
You wouldn't tell me.
So, I think Urge.
Which is tension. So we have the color charts for each of the 10 prints on the tension portfolio. And so this is one color chart and one print on the right. And, you know, I think for a lot of people people like me and general public, you know, we don't realize that an important aspect of the collaboration between an artist and a printer involves a lot of decisions. And so these color charts really do underscore that complexity. Would you be willing to describe for any artist in the audience what the importance is of developing the tools and language of production?
I mean, this is really sort of typical about how I make my paintings. You know, a lot of times I'll just draw everything out in pin lines without any color intentions until I sit in front of it. And then I'll start to select the colors and make dots on paper and write the numbers down. And so I'll go through, without seeing it on the canvas, I'll go through most of the painting. So choosing everything, and then only at that point did we start to actually get into the painting and putting the colors in space. It applies great when working with the printer because I can show, with, you know, for something like this, I'd recreate everything in vector and then just show it with paint chips and numbers from a system that I use in painting. So there's no sort of guessing around it. We sort of dial in really hard. And, you know, I've been working with the same printer,
Brand X,
since before we did that show in 2012. And they're Brooklyn-based, and it's great because I could just go over there and sort of get in their business. No, it's important. I always found, like, you know, a lot of the relationships I have they're really nurtured if you find somebody who's capable of doing what you want to do and you have a good relationship with them. You know, I do anything to sort of keep that and not, I don't know. It's a tricky thing. You're working with artisans. You're working with, you know, he's a master at what he does. And it's the same thing with the sculpture foundries. And when you sort of find those relationships, they're rare. And you should, I don't know, I believe in...
Have a mutual respect.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's very Westermanian of you, which I respect a great deal. So... our final slide is of the portfolio tension, the full suite of prints, which it's interesting if you go to the show, you can see or you can interpret or detect a kind of evolution in terms of the image in your work. And this seems to me the most complex and by far the most abstract of your prints. Do you see this movement toward greater abstraction as kind of an evolution in your practice, or is it kind of coming out of this moment of tension?
I think that's exactly what it was. I think this sort of series broke my printers and my studio.
How many screens? Do you remember? Or colors?
I don't. Probably like 40 to 50 per piece. Wow. It's tough work. But it was 2019. I was on a plane every month. I was like, there were so many projects in that year.
I told you, 10.
Yeah, no, I know. 2019 was really, and I just feel like maybe that anxiety kind of came out in the series. And since then, I've kind of moved back and have done, like my last show with Scars, that was very figurative and simple and more about narrative. And I think that's just sort of from being stuck in the house.
Well, I think that's a good place for our conversation to end and for us to open up the floor to questions. We have, I think, time for a couple of questions. Aaron, 4 or 5 questions? And I guess what we're going to do is we have mics, and Aaron and Yadira are going to set mics up on either side and either aisle, and we just ask you to come up to the mic and
I can hear you. I can hear you fine. He's turning my mic up, I think, to do for the art thing.
I just wanted to say that all your work is fire, and I appreciate everything that you do, man. Every single collaboration you do with either people in the fashion industry, with like Dior, Nike, I have your Nike KAWS on, the blazers. So I just want to say your work is pretty fire, but I do have one question. Don't know if you know a lot about the teams, but do
Never heard of them. What are those?
do you have any future projects, or do you have any, future projects going into that world as far as the metaverse and NFTs and things like that?
I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting things happening in that space. I just haven't myself made an NFT. So it's fascinating. It's fun watching it all, but the right thing hasn't sort of sunk in yet for me to want to do something that I feel like I can add to the conversation. So,
Thank you.
sure.
Because I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and I grew up in that area where graffiti was really heavy at that time. How much influence do the old graffiti artists, Don D, Lady Pink, Basquiat, how much influence did they have on you getting into this type of work?
I mean, those are 3 very different people.
Right.
So Dondi,
Yeah.
amazing legend, hero.
Right.
When I was in high school, Zephyr took me he worked at a bike shop. He made my bike a fixed gear. I've always, there's so many great writers that have influenced me.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know. It's sort of
Were
like
they the cause of you getting into this type of art, or?
No, I mean, I used to paint with Zephyr in the 90s when he
Right.
came back and he wanted to start painting again, and I'd get to hear all these sort of great downtown New York stories,
Right.
and from Crash and Days, and
Right.
like they all have this sort of great history, and thankfully now it's being a little more recognized, but there was a moment in the 80s where it was fully embraced, and then there was a moment after that where it fully wasn't. And I think like as sort of the smoke settles, people start to realize the importance of not just Basquiat, not like a Haring or these sort of few names that have sort of been pulled out and focused on, but like what Ramelzi or
Right.
what that circle around them sort of gave to that community.
Right. Thank you.
Sure.
You mentioned one of the big reasons that you work with all these companies and Reese's, Fortnite, all these partnerships is in part because, when you started getting your work out there and all the different mediums and getting, in front of the kids and influencing, as you started to work with these companies, going kind of from the boots on the ground graffiti to working with suits and that kind of stuff, have you found that your work has ever been tested or compromised between selling the product, but your original vision of like getting your stuff into a bunch of different mediums as you want? Have you felt like you ever had to like, I don't want to get you in trouble with some NDAs breaking or anything, but have you ever felt like you had to kind of walk that tightrope between what the company's vision is, or do you feel like it's been the opposite? You've got freedom, with all these different forms of medium.
I mean, knock on wood, I'm lucky that I'm in a situation where I can choose the projects I want to do. But it's always a trade-off. Everything you do is a trade-off. You find that sort of sweet spot between working with these big companies, but in a way that represents what you want to do and get into the world. When I think of like Fortnite, everybody's talking about inclusivity and sort of I just think of this massive community that is not engaged in the arts and not, so to take a museum in England and put it in their living room in a space that they're comfortable with every day, kids know that architecture now. And if they're in the city, they might take the time to go see the actual space. And, my show's long gone, they might walk into whoever's show. And that's great. Like, in my mind, that for me is a win. And I look at fashion the same way. I look at, like, just the simplicity, the guy who was up before you that had sneakers that I made on, like, just how that can exist and, can start a conversation between two people on a train or something. So, I like creating work that can kind of work in these realms. And yes, you have to work with companies, but companies are people, It's like, there's good ones, there's ways to navigate around it, and there's really horrible ones that you just figure out and hopefully avoid.
Oh, thank you.
Sure.
Over having a career that has spanned this much time, in a good way, in a good way.
I'm gonna get my rocker and
Having a career.
I'm in the mirror. I'm like, I know you're young. Sorry.
Are there any revelations, anything that you've learned about yourself as you've gone from project to project, and they've touched so many people, gotten this type of reaction? Is there anything that you have kind of learned about you that you are
intervention.
Open to share?
No, honestly, I don't really take anything for granted. I mean, I do appreciate the opportunities I have, and I know, I do. I collect a lot of art, I look at a lot of art, and I, through that, learn about trajectories of a lot of artists, and you just know as an artist that you're not always going to be on top or on point, or, moments come and go, and you just sort of embrace them both, embrace the highs, the quiet time, and the busy time. And I think if you enter into things knowing that, then you'll be a little bit more even-keeled when things go one way or the other.
Yeah. Thank you.
I don't know if that has anything to do with what you asked.
No right or wrong answer.
Yeah. Cool.
Hi. So I was wondering, what's your favorite piece that you've made so far in your career?
That's a tough question. That's been asked a lot of times, and it's impossible because it's sort of like siblings, You make things, and some things become more important because of other works you make later on, and you never really know as you're making stuff what's going to stick, things you could be excited about. Oh yeah, Downtime, the piece that Michael bought for the museum. It's clearly the most important thing I've ever done.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, Brian. My name is Ade. I really appreciate you coming out and talking to us and all the work you've done. My question is, was there a point in your career where you had that inner validation that you really love what you're doing, and also outer validation that from the world, the world really likes what you're doing too, in terms of a way for you to be able to sustain yourself financially doing what you love?
I don't think you ever. I don't know. I'm happy. I'm not super confident. I'm great. I'm doing good. This is gonna stick. I think it's good to kind of always be insecure and question what you're doing. I'm not oblivious. I make a living off what I do. I understand I'm in a very fortunate position, and I've been in it for a long time. And different people have different goals and things, and you look at some other things that are going on, you might think, oh, I'd like to be doing that instead of this. And so I don't think anybody's I don't know, maybe you all are extremely happy, but I hope to kind of always want to do other things. So.
Got you. And follow-up question, I've always wondered, what do the crosses mean on your companion doll, or just art in general?
Just that little question.
What does it mean to you?
No, I started when I started painting over advertising, and I started to think about mark making and kind of what at what point can something be whittled down to become, still identifiable, and what's the smallest amount of mark that you could to transition an image into something that's identified as yours. And so it's just something I've worked with for a while.
Gotcha. Appreciate it.
Sure.
We have, unfortunately, I'm sorry to all of you in line. We have time for one more question. We're going to throw over to this side.
Well, in that case, I hope this works for everybody. All of the opportunities and all of the things that you've done, was there a certain project that when you were working on, you said, wow, I've made it, or wow, I'm an actual artist. I'm not just that street artist that everybody keeps saying.
Honestly, I feel like every project's like that. Like, I don't know. I guess maybe I set the bar really low, but I've always been excited by what's going on at the moment, and I think that kind of gets me into the next thing. So. Well,
thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. And everybody, thank you again for coming. Brian Donnelly, thank you for being here.
Thank you.